Okay, right now I have the pleasure to introduce Dustin, and Dustin's going to introduce us to the landscape of why we had to go tapeless, okay? So, Dustin started his career editing documentaries and long-form programs broadcast on Discovery Channel Asia, MediaCorp, MediaWorks, while he was at Moving Visuals Company. Following that, he spent 2 years as lead editor, then director and producer at Free Flow Productions, specializing in TV commercials and corporate videos. Okay, so he's really spanned both production and post-production. So that's why he's really ideal person to talk about this area of work. Okay, what makes him even more qualified is then he moved on to ESPN Star Sports Asia, okay, to do programs that aired in Southeast Asia, Australia, and Africa. And now he serves as the manager for technology and broadcast integration at Fox International Channels, okay, including channels like Fox Sports, Nat Geo, Star World, and more. Okay, but above all of that, I'll be very frank. Okay, Dustin is one of the smartest people I know and a valuable resource. Okay, so when things are in doubt, who are you going to call? You call Dustin. Okay, and that's exactly what I'm going to do now. Please give a warm welcome to Dustin Lau.
I don't know how to live up to an introduction like that, but we'll try. Okay, first, my name is Dustin. I work at Fox International Channels, as Ian has mentioned, as the manager for server and technology integration. I know that makes me sound like I'm an engineer, but I assure you I'm an editor. I've been editing for the last 12 years. So basically, I've lived through the transition between a tape workflow to what is now moving towards a tapeless workflow. So it's happening whether we like it or not. So a good approach to change like this is always to arm yourself with information and try to figure out the best way to learn how to learn, basically. Because technology moves so fast that a lot of times you're just struggling to keep up. So it's actually learning how to figure out what the basis of it is. And why we're doing this forum in the first place is also to have a foundation of knowledge from which we can then understand the new standards as they come about. For example, Kevin's going to talk about the new audio standards that are being enforced in the UK. Already our Hong Kong office for Fox International Channels is already asking us to deliver things that would meet the new audio spec. So it's very useful for us to just keep updated with it. Now, can I just get a rough feel of the room? How many of you here are editors? How many of you are in the post-production industry? Maybe not editors, but supervisors or anything like that. What about producers and directors? And how many of you are all of the above? Join the club. So basically, what I'm going to go through now is where we come from, where we came from. Some people, some of you might be quite young, so you might not have gone through tape, but I work with some people in the office, and sometimes they work from the tape workflow, and as we were transitioning to the tapeless workflow, they're like, I wish we were back using tape. So what was it about tape that was useful and was used for so long? Part of it was that there were a limited number of dominant formats. So in the late 90s and the early 2000s, you pretty much had to deliver beta SP or digital beta. If you had a deck that could deliver both of these, what would happen is that you would be able to cover most of your delivery specs that you required. Now, the other thing as a result of this is that you had very standardized controls. You had, you had mark in, you had mark out, you had time code. All these were very standard. You didn't have to worry too much about them across different formats. They were fairly standard. Another thing is that you had a very simple archival solution, which is, just keep the tapes, whether it's your broadcast masters or whether it was your shoot tapes. And the other thing was that they were very durable. Hard disks are getting a lot better at standing up to the test of time, but even for long-term archival storage, we always go back to tape, which is LTO5 or anything like that. So now let's go on to why we felt that we needed to improve on what we had. We already had a working workflow of tape. We were already delivering on tape for decades. So why did we start to move towards a different paradigm? Now, one was the cost of decks, maintenance and tape stock. So I remember when I was shopping for a deck, when I was speccing out Free Flow Productions, we actually went to look for a digital beta deck, and it cost tens of thousands of dollars. Now, the price of that is pretty much, even now, the same digital beta deck is $9,000. So decks were always very expensive. So that's one of the cons of tape. The other is limited reuse cycles. You always had to deliver a brand new broadcast master. That's what your broadcast expects from you. And the other is real-time speed of ingest, outgest, dubbing, basically. If you had an hour-long program, you'd take an hour to get your master out. And also multiple simultaneous outputs. So let's say if you need to deliver 2 digital beta tapes, for example. If you only had 1 deck, you'd have to do it again. If you needed to do a VHS copy, a DVD, a recorder copy, you needed to either do multiple passes, and it's an hour every time for an hour-long show, or you needed to patch the outputs, something like this, just to get from one output to multiple outputs of the same thing. And the other is that, I talked earlier about how, you can just keep the tapes as archival, but that also means you need to store them. You need to know where they are. And you know how you can find your house keys? You can't find your house keys, but you can find something that's on your computer. That's the same thing. If you have physical items, you need to figure out where they are, and you need to know where they're kept. Now, the other thing is that you've got to maintain the library. You've got to know where your items are. You've got to know, I've got this tape. I've got to know what's in it. I've got to know what the contents are. So you've got to manage all that information as well. And also, you've got to retain old tape decks. So if you have a DV-Cam master that you've kept as archival, you need to have a DV-Cam deck in order to restore that information if you need it. Also, tapes used as weapons against tape operators. I've actually had friends that were tape operators that had tapes thrown at them as well. So now that we're moving to a digital world, hopefully all you get is a strongly worded email. So this is the balance of where we were in terms of pros and cons with regards to tape and why there was a necessity to look at transitioning. Hollywood already was looking at this ahead of us, and they had to transition eventually, but there was a catalyst that pushed them in that direction as well. So I was actually following this on Twitter as it happened. I was basically looking for information about the tsunami, loss of life and everything, but what also popped up because I follow some editors on Twitter was that editors were going, oh wait, I just realized the only factory that makes HD camera SR tapes is in Sendai. And there was a factory in Detroit that used to make it as well, but they had just decommissioned it. So there was only one factory in the entire world that was making HD Cam SR tapes. At that point, it didn't hit Asia as badly because we hadn't quite transitioned to HD yet. But for the US, there were a lot of networks that were already standardized on HD Cam SR as the delivery format. So what happens when the main delivery format has one factory and that factory is gone? This is what happened to the prices. One tape, an 2-hour tape for 750 US. So I saw an editor tweet about, okay, I just saw this happen. I realized the factory's there. I've gone downstairs and I bought out the entire shop. He tweeted 2 hours later, I decided I should actually get some more. So I got in my car, I drove around. Every other shop is sold out. So there was a worldwide shortage of HD Cam SR tapes. So what happened was that networks started looking at alternatives. So the television network started telling people, okay, you know what, you can deliver on a recycled tape. You don't have to use a fresh HD camera tape each time. But what they also did was that some of them were already exploring delivering tapeless. And in doing so, they just fast-tracked what was already in place, which was they had tapeless workflows in place. They already had built-up workflows around tape. So there was no necessity or no push for them to go ahead with tapeless. Then this happened, so they decided, all right, we've already got this in place, let's try it out. Now, one thing that people lament was lost was that everyone had already standardized on HD Cam SR, I had mentioned. So there was already a very strong workflow towards it. So that's what they lament was lost, that everyone had standardized on it, now we have to go to tapeless. And anyone that's had to deliver for tapeless now, there are some concerns over, oh, I've got to worry about what format it is, what codec I'm using and everything. So that's one of the things that they lament was lost when we shifted from tapeless to tape to tapeless. Now the other thing is that audio had recently, before that, gone through an analog to digital workflow as well. So at the start, what they noticed was that there was a lot of pain, but at the end of it, now everyone just moves on and gets on with it. So hopefully that's the place that we'll be in the future. Now, I just need a show of hands here. How many people here have worked on productions on which you worked on tape as in it was shot on tape? And how many of you still work on productions that are shot on tape? So that's a big transition we've seen on the acquisition side. Now we don't really shoot on tape anymore. A lot of the reasons that we've moved from shooting on tape to shooting tapeless are actually the same benefits that we get when we switch to tapeless delivery. Those are, you've got faster than real-time transfer. So if you shoot 4 hours, you don't have to wait 4 hours for your footage to get in. It transfers faster than that. The other thing is that when you have good metadata, and that the metadata is essentially data about the data. It's not the footage itself, but it's what tells you, it's the information that tells you what is in the footage. That makes material computer searchable. And this is useful for delivery, and I'll mention more about that later. Different formats are widely supportable. So what happens is that in the tape world, if you had to support a new format, you had to get a new deck, you had to get a lot of equipment, you'd spend a lot of cost outlay for that. But with tapeless, what happens now is that if you have a new format, if you have to deliver ProRes already comes with your NLE. If you have to deliver MXF, Premiere already supports it. So there's a lot of formats that you can deliver without having to buy new equipment to do so. And then there's less money spent and space taken up by physical media as well. So one of the main benefits of this is that changes can be made to the original master that we deliver for broadcast and then resaved. So what this means is that, for example, if I had a master that had an English language track on it basically, and now I need to deliver a Chinese version, all I need to do is take the master and add in the Chinese audio and resave it as the original master. And you don't have to send out 2 different tapes. You can have one file that would have multiple language versions on it that you can then deliver for multiple outputs. A possible application for this in the future is that you can deliver one file to multiple regions, and you can have on the client side or on the region, they would decode that file and go, okay, I've got this file and I'm in Vietnam, so I will just play the Vietnamese version. So that's one application of optimization that you can expect in the future. And the other thing I mentioned earlier about good metadata makes material searchable. The other good thing about it is that when metadata is available, you can also trigger automatic workflows. So basically, you can have computers that would then analyze the metadata and do housekeeping for you. You can go, okay, this footage hasn't been used for 7 days. I know I can clear it off now. So that's another optimization that you have as a result of metadata. Also, you know that earlier diagram I had about how many cables are coming out when you do multiple copies? The good thing about tapeless is that once you have your final master copy, you can already start encoding your YouTube version, your mobile version. You don't have to wait for real-time transfer times. And also, cross-continental delivery is possible with good internet connections. When we did the Olympics with Fox International Channels, what happened is that we were sending teams to the UK, and normally to send footage back, if you don't have to send it back live, you can send it back via satellite, but satellite time is really expensive. So what we explored was using internet connections to send the files back. We didn't have to send it back live, but we could send back, let's say, a 4-minute segment, and it would come back to Singapore in under an hour. So we had automatic workflows in place that would just receive the files from the UK, and they would go into the studio, and we could use it immediately. So these are some of the benefits that you get as well. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually show how things in the tape world and how they translate to the tapeless world. So for example, where we had tape formats, we have containers. So when people talk about MXF and QuickTime, just think of them as different types of tape. They're just containers that contain your video information. And when you think about the tape compression, basically that's what AVC, Intra, XDCAM, and all of that is. All that is that it's the quality that used to be built into the tape format is now a codec that you can encode into your tape containers. And the other is that labels and logs. You would never send out a tape without labels and logs telling you what's in it. And that's basically what metadata is. Metadata allows you to identify what's on your information, what's in the file, how is it useful to you. So that's the basic overview I have of the tapeless to tape transition. And I'll hand it over to Ian to talk about the visual specifications of how tapeless goes.
Please give Dustin a round of applause. Thank you so much.